Okay, so stay with me. The title of this talk is a little bit misleading. I got into design because of my dad. He's one of the smartest people I know, but I grew up in Nigeria, and I had a computer at home. My father would write 60, 70, 80 pages of notes by hand, get me or his secretary to type it up, make corrections, and we do this tedious process of digitizing after the fact. In 2009, he came to visit me in London, and he asked me to open the internet for him because he wanted to read local Nigerian news, but he didn't know how to use Internet Explorer. So design being accessible is not only about disability. It's about being able to empower people like my dad. It's 2019 now, he's got an iPad, he dictates his notes in, and so it's a little bit easier with converting to digitized stuff. He has an email address, he sends me emails, we play Words with Friends, he's doing stuff by himself. I used to want to be an architect, so I really like the physical space, and I've been thrilled to be in Pasadena because there's so much stuff to look at. The International Building Code has inside of it guidelines that state that buildings and facilities have to be designed to be accessible. One of my favorite buildings in London is the Bank of England. It's from 1794, and it's a grade 1 listed building, so you can't mess with it. And yet, this building is accessible. Tim Berners-Lee, who created is credited for the web, believes that the power of the web is in its universality. He believes that accessibility is a fundamental aspect of it because he wants access by everyone. Yet, when you look at information from the Business Development Forum that does testing, all of the websites that they've tested since 2008, they say 70% of them have failed accessibility. That's a staggering number for the time that we're in. I mean, I've looked at a number of websites, brands, products, things that we love that should know better, and they're still not accessible. I won't be naming and shaming any of them, don't worry. I was sort of at a talk by a guy, he gave a keynote called Samuel Prue, and he was born blind to a blind father. His dad worked in tech, so he's had access to assistive technology like screen readers since the infancy of the internet. And he said something that shocked me on the day. He said that the internet today is less accessible than it was when he first started using it, or in the early years. And my mind was blown. But thinking about it, the limitations of bandwidth, the hardware that we ran the internet on at the time, meant that you had a text-based experience largely for most of the internet. And now we've created these ecosystems, the Instagrams, the Snapchats. I mean, memes exclude me anyway, because I don't know what's going on. But people who used to have access to most of the internet are now being excluded completely from experiences that they should have. But, I've kind of dived into a lot of things, and I haven't checked with you what you think accessibility is. My favorite definition is this one from Sharon Rush. And I like this definition because a lot of the time when I start talking about accessibility, people focus on disability. On a project that I was on recently, so I do these things, kick-off workshops. If I'm creating a feature or product, I like to get all the people that will be impacted or the people that will impact on the product to discuss and agree what it is that we're solving. And then also we need to look at what success looks like. So we go into the room and I say that I want accessibility to be part of what success looks like for that product. And one of the designers asked me if I had any stats for how many of our customers were disabled. I was pretty aghast, to be honest. I was quite shocked because I wasn't sure. Could I say 1%, 10%? Would I need to get parity at 50% for my request to be granted? The other thing about disability, so if we want to focus on that as a reason to make things accessible, anyone can be disabled. Disability spectrum, it's not a permanent state. I like this definition of disability by the World Health Organization. So it says it's a mismatch between the features of people and the environments that they interact with. Now, when you substitute environments with things, with products, with societies, you start to see that we as designers are creating disability. I travel a lot, and I've been to a few countries, and the only times I feel overwhelmed by travel is when I go to places where I can't read. I cried in Delhi. I was just like distressed in Israel, because when I don't have any Latin roots or Latin alphabet to rely on, I have no understanding. There's a mismatch between my features and the features of the environment that I'm in. Looking at Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit here, we start to see some of those examples of the disability spectrum. You have people that are permanently or have permanent disability, people that have temporary disability, and also probably the most common, which is people that are disabled by the situations that they're in. So looking at hearing, for instance, if I was creating an experience for a product or something that people are going to interact with, and I wanted to use audio feedback, people who are deaf, someone who's got an ear infection, or just a bartender at a really loud festival, an airport, anywhere that you can't really hear, would have the same challenges with interacting with my product. So, why should you care? I've tailored this bit for you guys, especially in America, because, suing is a thing here. But I don't want us to only think about that. It could also be because it's the moral thing, it's the right thing. I'm a big believer in that, but I know that that doesn't help anyone usually, especially when we're talking about people that work for businesses. So I'm going to hit you with this one. It's profitable. You can make money if you think about designing for the widest possible audience that will use your products. Now, the next slide I'm going to show was in this deck before I listened to Liz Jackson. So please, don't blame me. So I grew up and I used scissors like everyone else. I hadn't thought about the concept of right-handed scissors. Then one time, I'd hurt my right hand, and I tried to use my scissors to cut something. Wow, the pain. There had been people who had been left-handed who had been suffering for years, and I was completely unaware of it, because I'm right-handed. So the Good Grip scissors were created because you do not need to have right-handed scissors, and they made them money. I started learning Spanish a few months ago, and I'm one of those super keen people. When I'm into something, I'm really into it. So after the 10-week sort of beginner lesson, my instructor saw how keen I was and was like, look, you can watch like telenovelas, you can look at La Casa de Papel, and you can expand your vocabulary by watching TV. So I ran off Netflix, put it on, and realized that my listening is substantially worse than my reading. So I had to use subtitles to get through the show. There you have closed captioning, a feature that was created for people that were hard of hearing, that people are using in very different contexts. We all think that we're not using products, or maybe you're not aware of the products that you're using that have been created or come out of thinking from helping people with disabilities. But I'm pretty sure all of you here today have used drop curbs or Siri, Alexa, any of these other voice assistants, even the humble electric kettle. Back when I was a kid, you used to have like some mad strength to pull out the cord from the kettle before you moved with it. And if you were ridiculous like me and kept forgetting all the time, you had a bunch of accidents. All of these things have been improved and sold a lot because of accessibility and accessible design. When I was working for Vogue, I went to Tokyo to do a piece of research. And I spoke to a bunch of users and found out a bunch of things. But this is probably the most interesting thing I've ever found out from user research. Japanese society works quite long hours. So we had a spike in traffic at about 10 p.m. at night when people would go home. Data is also expensive. So this woman was thrilled that she could watch her videos on the Vogue website while she was at work if they didn't autoplay and had subtitles, so no one would know in the office. You have an accessibility feature, once again, being used in a completely different and unexpected context. I'm a designer, so let's say I was thinking about creating something, say a mobile phone app, which is something that I would do. And I decided that I was going to just forget about people who might need to use my product with one arm. I'd look up the statistics and I'd be like, well, there's only 26,000 people in the US that have one arm, so it's not going to be a problem. But I've forgotten that it's a spectrum. When we start looking at all the people that have sprained their arms, broken their arms, whatever it is, or people who have babies. I mean, I went round to my cousin, and she legit cooked me a meal while holding her baby in one hand. So it was like one-handed operation everywhere. People are using mobile phones all the time with one hand. That's the number of people that you exclude, actually, if you do not think about that use case. 21 million people. For people that work for businesses that care about funnels, that's a huge number to ignore. You're literally leaving money on the table, flushing it in the toilet, whatever analogy you need to let you think about that if you don't make your product accessible. So clearly, I'm not the first person to have this knowledge. I'm not the only person to have this knowledge. So why do we still have 70% of our websites that aren't passing accessibility checks? How can we change that? The thing that I hear most from most of my designer colleagues is that they know what they need to do. They know that they need to do things with contrast and color and think about simple language, but they don't know how they get to do it. There's also this thing where you can never know what you don't know. So I was blown away, sort of about the news from Liz about OXO and a few other things that she said in her talk. A few months ago, when I listened to Samuel Prue, I was taken back to a time when I created a user experience based on information that I had from user research. We observed that people were going onto social media, they'd look at images, they'd click on the images, they'd go onto our website, they'd look at the images on the website, they'd make decisions on what content that they needed to read based on those images. So I changed the user experience. I bumped up all the images on the articles. I moved the titles below the lead image. So people were getting a hit of image, 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 image in their journey through the website. I created a visual, a more image-led experience for our customers. Then I heard Samuel Prue speak, and I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Even with all of my interest and my knowledge, I didn't know what I didn't know. So this graph is terrible. I didn't create it. I picked it up from someone's blog. But what I'm trying to show you is that given the things that you think you know, but are wrong, and the things that you know you don't know, the actual biggest gap in your world is the things that you don't yet know that you don't know. So how do we combat that? We need a diversity of perspectives. We need different people in our experience design. We need different people on our teams. We need different people in the research that we do. You can't think about accessibility and not actually bring in the people that have the challenges that you're trying to solve for. I pay attention to quite a few things based on my lived experience. I hate navigation that's at the top of mobile screens because, again, you know, one hand, how am I going to get there? But other people have other things that they're looking at. So if you just have a different set of people from different cultures, different nationalities, different abilities, you start to get a sense of a fuller product. If you can't get access to a range of people for any reason, you can start to educate yourself on the internet. There are lots of websites, including the W3C, that list out the guidelines for accessibility. There are plugins for browsers like Chrome, or you can get plugins for design tools like Sketch. If you create design systems and document them using Storybook, they've just released a new version that highlights inaccessible components within your system. You can get people like me in to chat to your team. I'm very persuasive. And you can get people who call themselves accessibility consultants or whatever to help you. Lots of help. For those that are going solo, this is probably my favorite thing for getting education. So it lists out the W3C guidelines, but it also gives you filters. So if you want to hit an A, a double A, a triple A, you can filter and see what guidelines work for you. Or if you want to focus only on the things that you can affect because you're a single designer on a team, you can look at the tab that shows you the things for designers, or you can go and look at things for developers. It even tells you what to look for when you're testing. This one is probably the most annoying thing that I hear. I'm very visual, so, but people tell me that they think that if they have to create accessible products, that they're going to be ugly. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I can't use a website or a product, I'm not going to think about how beautiful it is. Anyone here who thinks that their job is to create beautiful products, I'd love you to not call yourself a designer anymore. Just rebrand as an artist. Because designers should be problem solvers. We should link our work to solving problems for the people that we're creating them for. We should be thrilled at the addition of constraints. We should be thrilled at the challenge that designing an accessible product provides to us. I've seen people create designs for small buttons or business cards. I've seen digital designers create responsive design that works on big billboards as well as small mobile. We're not clearly worried about constraints. We embrace them. If a 225-year-old building in London is currently accessible, your challenge is far less complicated and far less expensive. 10 years ago, I think, I came to Los Angeles for the first time. And if there's any such thing as dyslexia of space, I've got it. I don't know left and right, horizontal or vertical. I have to think, pause, think about it, and I get lost all the time. So it's sort of 2008. People don't have access to cheap data. So I had to ask people for directions all the time. And I'd ask people where to go, and they'd be like, oh yeah, just go 5 blocks southwest, or go 2 blocks north, or whatever. And I got really frustrated. I didn't know what a block was, and I most certainly didn't know where southeast was. Today, I've walked around Pasadena quite happily. using Google Maps. And I hadn't thought about whether Google Maps was beautiful until I decided I was going to give this talk. And objectively, I would say I find it beautiful, but I don't really care because I can use it. And it's also 100% accessible. The other thing people think about or tell me is that they worry that they have to convince everyone else to do their bit. I mean, no product is designed and created in isolation, unless you're a unicorn, in which case, please find me after. I need to know your secrets. So it's a fair concern. But lots of the people that I know that have made their websites, their products accessible, actually started out by themselves. I started out alone. As a designer, you're in a position of power because you have control of the thing that people feel and people see. I used to ask people if I could put accessibility as part of the success metric, or if I could make things accessible. And I always got told no. They'd tell me, oh, it's beyond the scope of the minimum viable product, or there's no time for it right now, it's too complex. But when I started submitting my wireframes that had a minimum contrast ratio, that had multiple methods of communicating information, not relying only on color, that tried to minimize the errors that people could make, and used simple language in the microcopy, no one challenged me. I was an accessibility ninja. So this is probably the most important thing for me, which is that accessibility isn't a separate thing. It's, as a customer experience person, as a person that's interested in designing a product for a person, you're not doing anyone any favors to try to design for everyone. It's part of the customer experience. I don't call myself an accessibility specialist or an accessibility consultant. I call myself what I am, a user experience designer. With the greater understanding that we have of the range of situational disability that people can encounter, with neurodiversity, with different experiences, people like my dad, and aging populations, you really have no reason to hide function and information from your users. You should bake in accessibility. It should be part of your process. It should be part of your practice. You should have people that are disabled in your life. You should have people that are not like you in your life. Because once you have those things and you get that diversity of perspectives, you start to get a fuller picture, a product that more and more people can use, more and more money for you. We should all care about delighting our customers, and accessibility is part of that. Thank you.
So I'm curious, when you think about accessibility, when we look at the web and mobile and a lot of technologies that we've been working with for a while now, we have pretty clear accessibility standards and guidelines. We know how to work with color contrast and, to use the standards that exist. But when we think about designing with emerging technologies, if we think about designing for augmented reality, if we talk about designing in some cases for, conversational or voice UIs, that we don't have standards for those things yet. And so do you have thoughts about, as a designer, how you should approach integrating accessibility when you're working with technologies where you don't have clear standards yet?
I'm going to have to lean back on what I learned from Liz. Just get people that need accessibility creating the products, because they'll see the things that we can't see. They'll help us think about the things that we don't know, and they'll really broaden our perspective and help us together come to a solution that works. So I don't have any experience now in emerging technology, but as I tackle it, I'll certainly be looking to people that have challenges in that space and figure out what it is that we need and what standards we need to create.
Great. Thank you so much.
Cheers.